If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
This is another of our popular Listener's Choice interviews, which we're playing over the weekend. We've chosen the most popular interviews for you to select the Listener's Choice winner. If you're not sure how the Listener's Choice competition works, have a look at horsechats.com/choice for the rules and the leaderboard. Our guest today is Amanda Hocking. If you've already heard Amanda Hocking on the show, you would have heard number 41, which was when we introduced Amanda initially, but she was so popular we had her back on the Listener's Choice episode number 212. Today, Amanda's going to talk to us about 10 tips to a happier horse. How are you today, Amanda?
I'm very well, thanks, Glenys. How are you?
Good. Amanda, we can always tell how a person's happy. You know, they're happy, they're smiling, they're laughing. We can tell a bit in their body language, but tell us about how we can tell if a horse is actually happy.
Well, there's a few pointers that are obvious, but there are some pointers that are a little bit more subtle and a little bit just in the horse world. A happy horse is relaxed when it needs to be, but it's also energized when it has to be. And in this instance, horses have got to be able to put their body really into a relaxed state when they're grazing, but then they've also, at a flick of an ear, they've got to be able to up and run, and that's how they've survived all these years. It eats and drinks well.
Okay.
Yeah, so it eats and drinks well, as in like when food's presented, it eats, and when it's thirsty, it drinks. It's not sort of in a state where it's anxious and overlooks doing those things. Another thing is that it's obliging and friendly. Now, some people think their horses love them when they're all over them and they're smothering them, and the horse is trying to cuddle up very close. But that's actually the horse trying to demand things from you. When a horse is obliging and friendly, then it's a balanced, happy horse.
Okay, so that obliging, that obviously doesn't account to horses rubbing on you and things like that. You talked about being friendly. Some people like it if their horse rubs on them and, treats them as a post almost. Yeah.
That's right. And whilst it's rather, nice if your dog or your cat does it, actually do it when they're trying to dominate you. But horses trying to push on you like that, it can lead to some unwanted behaviour, but it also is another way of trying to dominate you. So obliging means they hold their own space, but they're, interested in what you're doing.
Okay. Yes. All right.
Another thing to look for is that it understands what's required of it. Now, this is probably one of the things that not only falls down in our communication with horses, but it also sometimes falls down in our communication with people. And if we're not experts at it with our own kind, then we're not going to really be experts at it with another species. And it's really important that we undertake to understand that the horse understands what we're asking of it and that he's clear.
I like the way you say that, that we undertake to communicate with the horse, because it's not just the horse can't read our mind and the horse is doing it on purpose or anything else. Sometimes the horse is quite confused with what we ask, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You and I are not exactly spring chickens, and we've been around horses a long time, and it's still a challenge to be sure that the horse is totally understanding. So it's a process. It's an ongoing process. Don't expect to know it all. We'll probably all leave this earth not knowing it all, but as long as we undertake to try to do the best we can, then we're usually working on the right side of things.
Okay. Yep. What's the next point, Amanda?
And the one that is one of the easiest ones to be aware that something's going on but not quite sure what's happening here is that the horse is neither dominant and it's not being dominated. So a friend of mine, or a very good trainer that I've trained with, he draws a line in the sand, maybe about a metre long, and he draws a cross-section at about 500 centimetres, halfway across the line, and he says that's the line, the one that crosses. And he said most horses and owners, one end of that line is the horse is totally dominating the human, and the other end of that line is the human is totally dominating the horse. And he said in the middle is where we want to be. Now, that line's a little bit, it'll waver a little bit left and a little bit right. But you can stick somewhere in the middle there, then you're working towards a harmonious and a happy horse.
Okay.
And we're a lot happier. If the horse is working in harmony with us, then we're a lot happier.
Yep. All right. So thinking about horses that exhibit these qualities, we've got the horse is happy. For a happy horse, it's relaxed and energised, depending on what you want. It's eating and drinking well, so that's a bit of help as well. Obliging and friendly, but understands what's required of it. And I think, that's quite an important point. So it's not tense and nervous and worried. If it's eating and drinking well, it's not stressed and underweight. It's neither dominant or dominated. What we're going to talk about now is the 10 tips to get that horse to that happy spot. And even if you can put a tick box on all of the above, you can still go through and listen to these tips, because I'm sure you'll pick up a lot. I think Amanda's, had horses and trained with horses and done a lot with horses for quite some time. I think when she talks about the 10 tips to a happy horse, I think she's well versed in this and, has a very good understanding of how to get your horse happy. So what's the first thing that we can do to get our horse to be happier, Amanda?
Well, in my point of view, number one is training on the ground.
Yes.
And because I came through the horse industry, I started off a working life as a groom. I was a coalface, all right? Often, especially as I started in England, often the riders themselves don't spend a lot of hands-on time with the horses. And we're the ones that had to get them fed. We had to prepare them. We had to, do all the clipping and the feeding and et cetera. And if the horse had issues, then we're the ones that were either going to end up sort of munched up on the wall in a sort of ghastly mess.
Yes.
Or, constantly having to tell the horse off for doing things. And I worked out very early, if I was going to survive this trip, I had to have some really good rules and regulations about handling the way the horses are handled, so that they appreciate me being around them, so they're not scared of me, but they also respect that I'm a lot smaller than them, and therefore, I have to be looked after a little bit that way too. So whatever discipline you partake, from the moment you take over as a carer for that horse, your role is that of a benign dictator. So your word is absolute.
Okay.
It means beat them up, but your word is absolute. And one of the things that it's gradually starting to take a groundswell here in Australia, but it's we're not short of good trainers for training on the ground, and we can tell a horse has only got to walk off the float, or some of them come off at the bus.
Yes.
We know straight away whether that's had any decent training on the ground or whether he's, very green at this sort of thing, and we're going to have to do a bit of work with him.
Yep. Okay. No, I think that's good. Yeah. So
the groundwork sets up the precedence for a workable relationship that's based on mutual respect. Your horse, you teach the horse patterns of behaviour that will keep you and your horse safe. And there's been a few times in my life where something's happened outside of, away from my horse and me, but because my horse was controllable in a very tricky situation, it didn't all turn to custard and everybody ended up okay. So yep. I'm really thankful that we spend the time doing this. You communicate in a language that the horse understands. Now, you can't do effective groundwork unless you understand what some people call horsese. You have to be able to speak the language of the horse.
Well, the horse has to be able to understand you as well, don't they? It works both ways. Yeah.
Can communicate to a horse in a language he understands, which a lot is body language, which you've mentioned before. if we know what a horse is intimidated by and what he respects, then we can choose the way we work around him so that he learns to be, oh, okay, this is my boss mare. I know I've got to do as I'm told. That's okay. She'll look after me.
Yes.
Of course, that if you're trying to, one, for instance, if you wanted to show a human being that you really weren't very happy with it, you would either shout at it, or some people would even, a bit of slapping perhaps around the face, something like that. That's a really agitated human telling another human they're agitated.
Mm-hmm.
These are two totally alien things for a horse. They never attack each other around the face if they want another horse to understand what they're asking. And they certainly don't shout at each other.
Yes.
So it's, you to try and communicate to your horse with either of those two mannerisms, you're going to have a really bad result.
Mm-hmm.
So it's ways to understand how a horse learns. The exercises available through groundwork are very natural for the horse, yet they're very, very often alien to humans. So you need to work with someone who's skillful in this area.
And I think that's a key point there too, Amanda, is to work with someone who's skillful to get the knowledge. It's easy to get a bit mixed up yourself and do things the wrong way.
Oh, absolutely. This is not something you read a book and then go out and practice. You have to have hands-on experience with another. And I've put a few names here, like I think most of us are familiar with Steve Brady. Down in Victoria, we've got David Simons, Odie Rawson-Harris, Ken Faulkner, and, of course, the one that's probably had the most written articles is Andrew McLean from the Australian Equine Behavioural Centre. So we're very lucky he lives just down the road from us.
Yeah, we've had Andrew and David both on the show as well, so they might want to have a look and find out a bit more about them and what they're doing. Yeah.
So that sort of covers, one thing that I really liked about it is that you can often when you're short of time, and now down here in Victoria, it's getting very cold and wet. And a lot of people, working late hours, and when they come home, to do their horses feeding up and rugging up, if you can take an extra 10 minutes, just take a halter out to the paddock, do a little groundwork with your horse, you could probably achieve more in 10 minutes than you can with 30 minutes under the saddle. So that way you and your horse are ticking along really nicely on those nights when you can't get to them.
Yep. All right. Now, what about training from the saddle? If we want to have a happy horse, we still want to be able to ride them, or what can we do with riding the horse and training from the saddle?
Yeah, and I've included driving as well because I teach a few drivers.
Sure.
And they have exactly the same needs that we do from the saddle. And I always go back to the universal or the German training scale as my go-to place for lifetime of guidance. It's also great to have horsemen and women who use this training scale as your mentors. And I would say that training from the saddle is first and foremost, find yourself a really great coach. And there's a difference between a great coach and a good coach. A good coach takes you where you want to go. A great coach takes you where you don't necessarily want to go, but should.
Yes, I think a great coach has got a good idea on boundaries and knows when to just push those boundaries a tiny bit as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. A great coach trains you to think. A good coach will help you through problems.
Yes.
And, they don't teach you how to think. And, we don't ride under instruction all the time. And in Australia, it's not a thing that we do commonly, whereas in Europe they do. And we've got to sit there for a minute and think, now, hang on, this is not going how I expected. What have I got in my toolbox? What have I learned? How would somebody else do it? And think about your mentors and bring that information into play when you're on your own. Now, in order to have a great coach, you've got to be a good student and learn to ask good questions. I think this is something that perhaps in England we weren't encouraged to do. We were sort of get on with it. Come along now, chop chop. But certainly learn to ask good questions that will answer and if something's going wrong, don't hide that. Bring that up into the conversation and say, look, I need help with this.
Yep.
That's what you
Yep.
do. Not to show them how wonderful you are. You go to, basically air your dirty laundry and
Yes.
get a question answered. Another part of being a very good, being a student, because if you can't take on board what's being told, sometimes it's not stuff we want to hear. And, you've got to go home and sort of mutter and grumble under your breath, I'm doing this for you, so on and so forth. But, as they say, suck it up and try to work out how you can best use that information for you and your horse.
Yep.
I've found become very, again, it's similar to what in number one, become very familiar how your horse learns. It's been such the best thing ever since I have really got into the psychology of horses and how they operate in the wild and how they operate in our lives.
Yep.
It's been so bad. Yeah. Animal behaviourists like Andrew McLean tells us that when we ask our horse a question, the horse does not think about giving you a right or wrong answer. He responds to the questions based on what he knows and what's going to work out best for him.
Yep. And I think that's an important thing, just that is, they're not scheming, they're not thinking in the future, they're thinking in the now, this is what the response is. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're flight animals.
Yes.
And one of the interesting things that science has now proved that when a horse gets to a point where he's thinking about fleeing, he cannot learn. He's switched into a mode that is all about escape.
Yep.
The brain switches off. He can no longer stand there and learn anything. So when the horse gets to the point where he's in a muck, lather, or sweat, and he's really unhappy, it doesn't matter what you can do. You can't teach that horse anything.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, I had a thoroughbred come to me, and he couldn't cope with being out of the sight of other horses. And if I tried to take him away from the horses, he'd just shut down. And there was nothing I could do. I could work him for, 2 or 3 hours, and he would not learn a thing.
Yep.
And I had to really work on the skill of, taking him away from a horse just out of sight for a moment and then bringing him back. Take him away for a moment and bring him back, and just gradually build on that. And I can remember the first time he walked down the driveway without getting jig-joggy and upset. I was just like, wow, this is amazing. It took a while. And that horse went on to become a very successful show jumper.
Did he? Yeah, that's good. That's a good story, isn't it? That you took the time earlier on to train the horse to do that, and then he went on and had great success. That's good.
Yeah. It's all trainable, but some things take longer than others.
Okay.
When a horse responds with unwanted behaviour, we can't ignore it. Okay, it's a little bit the fashion these days with training of, well, bit of a rough word to use for children. But when you're trying to bring your children, it's a little bit, well, ignore the bad behaviour, respond to the good behaviour. But animals are a little bit different. And when a horse responds with unwanted behaviour, you have to very quickly suggest that he tries looking for another answer. So you don't punish them, but you just respond with asking again, because actually the horses like for you to leave them alone is a reward. So if you ignore bad behaviour, you're actually kind of saying, well, it's okay, keep going with that.
They might just think that's what you wanted in the first place if you
Exactly.
just ignore it and leave them. Yeah.
Looking for you to stop asking them something.
Yes.
That's the whole way to learn a lot. And if you just ignore bad behaviour, then you're rewarding it in a way. So try to respond quickly in a way of saying, well, I'm going to ask you again.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you again. And the horse stops for a moment and just tries to think, then you reward that. So you can see saying, okay, I'm not giving the right answer here. What's being asked?
Yes. That's
when you alone time to think. Okay, so it's it's a little bit different to how humans respond. So we need to align ourselves with people who can show us this.
Yep, that's good.
When your horse says no, you've either asked the wrong question or you've asked the right question in the wrong way. And that's just the way horses are.
Yep.
As a trainer, you to reward all the efforts that result in wanted behaviours.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it can often be just the tiniest flick of an ear. But if we reward that, then it'll turn the ear, and then it'll be a look from the horse, and then he'll turn and face us. And this, a flick of the ear eventually will be a horse that walks up to you and says, "Hey, I'm your friend."
Yes.
But it starts as tiny and in the ear. So we have to be really, it's not what we're used to.
That's what shows a trainer that has got some talent and some abilities. They pick up on these tiny, tiny little cues, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And I think that everybody has the potential to become that trainer if they're prepared to work with people who do that and say, well, there's a beautiful story about Bruce Lee, the kung fu trainer, and he had this young fellow come to him who was very athletic, and he said, "Bruce, I want you to teach me everything you know. I'm already successful in what I do, but I want you to know." And Bruce picked up 2 glasses. One was full of water and one was empty. And he put the full glass of water in front of the young man and he said, "This is you." And he said, "Until you can learn to become over here like the empty glass, I have nothing."
Okay.
And some have to go to a coach and we have to pour out our glass of water and become an empty vessel and accept that, we need to put some space there for these people to put their information into us. So we have to give up some things in order for them to show us the way.
Yes. And I think that's human training, isn't it? To be open, to be able to accept those ideas, to then become a better trainer, better horse trainer.
Yeah, absolutely. And mistakes, just be prepared to make them. It's just the way it is. It's not, for some reason, there's a little bit of stigma about making mistakes, but really it is the way to learn, and be prepared to make them. Don't get hung up on them. A few times I've done things with horses that I've sort of thought, well, that wasn't a very smart move, and I've worried about it. But really, horses are very forgiving. They seem to understand that we're a lot slower than them, and they kind of go, okay, just try again. We'll see if we can give that a go. So don't get hung up on the mistakes. Keep working on it.
Yep.
There's a great quote from the author of the Narnia series, C.S. Lewis, who says, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." And that's always fun.
Yes, that is a good quote. Yeah. So we've talked about training on the ground and training under the saddle. What else can we do? What other tips can we use to get happier horse?
So, like us, horses are rather fond of their comfort. As I think I've mentioned before, when we're training them, if we can show them that if they give us an answer we like, we leave them alone. One of the mistakes that I see frequently, especially in dressage, it's not so often in show jumping or cross-country work, but in dressage, people go, they ask a question a couple of times and then they get a really good answer. And then they go, "Wow, that was amazing. Let's do it again. Let's do it again.
Yes.
And then, they teach the horse to resist because the horse is saying, "Gosh, I keep giving you the answer. Why am I not getting off the hook here?" And you've got to understand, horses learn by you leaving them alone. So even if you just, drop the rein and walk off or change the exercise, do something different, the horse starts to pick up on patterns of what you want. So you've got to work on horses share our love of comfort, and they can actually learn a lot by just working out how not to be uncomfortable. As the carer, we're responsible for the comfort of the horse, and that includes the training from the ground and the saddle. So we teach them how to find a comfortable place. Then we look at the other parts of his world, which is equipment. Nowadays, there's an absolute plethora of information out there about well-fitting saddlery and bridles. And if you're not experienced, that's what your coach or your saddle fitter can help you with and show you how to fit your equipment correctly. Look for the kindest bit that gets the job done. Now, there's a little bit of fashion going on in bits. I think it's always been a little like that. And, we try this and what works for that horse will obviously work for everything. Well, it's not quite that. What we should be doing is looking for the bit that gets the job done. And Tom Roberts' books, they're oldies, but you can still get them. And they've got a lot of great information. I remember one that I first got when I first came to Australia. It's called Horse Control in the Bit. And it was just a great book. And it's still available, and, you can get it on Amazon and places like that.
I think if you go to Horse Chats, and if you just go to horsechats.com/books, or just go to horsechats.com and search for Tom Roberts, I think you'll find the how to get that book. So, yeah, there are a couple of books there. Yep.
Oh, that's great. That's good. And then you've got your own personal equipment. So by personal equipment, I mean a stable and independent seat, quiet
Yes.
and feeling hands, steady and encouraging legs, and a voice that is quick to reward. So again, a good coach can help you achieve all of those. If we can get an opportunity to work on a lunge, that's just amazing to help you produce an independent seat and learn to feel what's happening underneath you, etc. So that's your personal equipment.
Because everyone wants that. Everyone wants to have a good seat, soft hands. Everyone wants that, and everyone thinks they're working, but you really need to get the help of a coach or someone to help you to say how to improve it and how to get better and how to keep going. Yeah.
We're lucky down here. We get visited by Tanya Mitten quite often, and she's
good.
super.
Yep. And another guest on Horse Chats.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah.
She's super. And then if you can work with coaches that understand that sort of anatomy of both you and the horse, it's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's the more physical side of their comfort, things like floats and trucks that allow for good ventilation and a quiet and solid and safe journey. I've had a few horses arrive in this little rattly, sort of noisy piece of wood held together with baling string. And, that's not conducive to a quiet, happy horse in travelling mode.
Yep.
And just the safe and solid paddocks, yards, tie-up places and stables. So, if you adopt an attitude, well, if a horse can get himself into a tangled trouble, he will.
Yes.
So just put there on the safe side of tie-up areas and footing and gates and things like that. Yeah.
Good.
So that helps make you and him more relaxed.
All right. So that was number 3, and that was about the comfort of the horse. The next one you've got is companionship. And just tell us a bit about the horse's needs of a companionship and, whether you have them as part of the herd or, talk about the relationship there. But I think if people understand about the companionship a horse requires, that's going to help make their horse happier as well.
Well, in a perfect world, if we were going to keep domesticated horses, we would keep them in a very large paddock that had undulating terrain and beautiful, little creeks running through it and lots of trees and cows that they can, play with and scratch and have relationships with. That's in an ideal world, but then we start thinking perhaps more into the area of competition horses where we have to keep them maybe rugged and they're shod, so on. As some horses eat more than others, so on. So this starts to make that scenario difficult, and we then have to adapt what we're asking the horse to, the way we keep our horse, so that he can still feel that he has companionship, but perhaps isn't tearing each other's rugs or threatening each other, kicking or pinching food, things like that.
Yes.
So you need to try and keep suitable companions within sight There's nothing more devastating for a horse to not be able to see other horses. I mean, even if it's just a bit of a dot on the horizon, it's something. So if you can try and keep the horses in sight of each other, that is very helpful.
Yeah.
The number one cause of illness or death with performance stallions is the stress from the lack of companionship. And of the 3 horses we deal with, we've got geldings, mares and stallions. The stallions are the ones who need companionship the most.
That's an interesting statistic there as well about the number one cause of illnesses and death, isn't it, for the stallions?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you go to a place like Vorendorf in Germany, which is the big breeding barn, and they have 200-odd stallions there, all housed together next door to each other. They're run as colts until they're 3 years old. They all run in the same paddocks as colts.
Yep.
Then they have to rug and everything, so they put them into separate stables, but they can constantly touch each other through the bars.
Yeah, yeah.
So talking to each other through the bars.
Uh-huh.
And if one goes out, you know, for whatever, goes to be worked or collected, you know, his mate will call after him.
Mm.
And they none of them, there's no nasty, there's no ears laying back. That was what I noticed.
Yep.
When one horse gets let, none of the other stallions lay their ears back. They might chat and nicker, but they'll never lay their ears back. That's interesting. You know, sometimes you go to a barn here in Australia and they're mares and geldings, there's no stallions, and the horses are savage to each other as they lead them out. So that's telling you the balance isn't right there yet.
Yes, yeah. Because if you go back to what you do want, the horse is neither dominating, they're obliging, they're friendly. There's not the stress there that's associated with the ears back and the problems that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. Mm. So when you're housing horses and try to use sharing facilities if possible, either paddock together or within sight of each other, next door to each other, but always put 2 fences. Horses always get into trouble across fences. They're actually safer in together than they are one fence between them.
Yep.
Allow touching or mutual grooming whenever it's safe. We saddle our horses all up together and they all stand, they can stand each other's space, they can rub each other, they've got, they keep putting their bottoms to each other. There's never any arguments, kicking, fighting. There's never anything. They're like a bunch of old men, honestly. They're terrible. They're always leaning on each other and chatting and scratching. So we've never had a problem in the shed, and we've done that for 30-odd years. So
Okay.
We allow that. But the main thing there, the only person who's going to get into trouble is the people, humans.
Yes.
So they have to be. Sometimes the horses will lean on each other and you could get, leant on in the middle. But that's the thing that we worry about. Travelling, again, is sharing. Very rarely do horses hurt one another when they travel together. So we don't really like to have lots of partitioning between them. Again, if the horse is feeling that he needs to protect his space and by attacking another horse, the balance is out somewhere else. And usually if you address this groundwork and socialising, the horses will give that up. It's interesting. The more groundwork you do, the better they play together.
Okay.
If we really are, they will attach themselves to goats and cows.
Yes. Okay.
Like that. So goats, they're the next best. If there's nothing else, probably
pretty good. Yeah. And you do hear some good stories for horses with different animals, goats, dogs, cows, sheep. And sometimes too, you'll find a horse that's got a travelling goat that goes with it to places.
Yeah. I think goats are better than ponies, I must admit. Shetland ponies, I think often they turn out to be more trouble than the original horse. But
okay.
Goats are slightly more managed.
Yeah. All right. Now the next thing you've got, number 4, is routine. So what have you got to say about routines and how we can help the horses to become happy with their routine?
This is an interesting comparison with humans here because they say that humans like to have a routine as well, and it's a part of that knowing what's wanted of them. horses love routines and they love knowing what's expected of them. And in the past, their survival relied on their ability to follow leadership and to recognise a safe situation from a dangerous one. So they're wired to changes in their routine.
Yep.
And whilst we don't want to become a slave to it, like rushing around trying to make sure we always feed at the same times, be aware that horses will react slightly negative when their routine is altered too much.
Mm-hmm.
And we deliberately leave our horses out in the paddock every now and again.
Yep.
Normally they come into what we call walk-in, walk-out yards where they can see each other and touch each other. But every now and again we leave them out so that they're not completely tied into this routine of we go in, we go out at night.
Yep.
Because what often happens there, I learned that horses will hang on the gate. They'll hang around the gate all from about 3 o'clock, especially from about 3 o'clock onwards.
Oh, yes, waiting for feed, yes.
So now ours have learned, I've noticed, because we keep turning them out, at least once a month they go out for a couple of nights. And I've learned now that they wander up about 4:35,
mm-hmm.
check out to see if anybody's going to come and get them. And if by 5:30 nothing's turned up, they wander off again. And that is probably a way that we prefer them to be a little bit like that.
Yep.
So that they're not reliant on it and they're not reliant on us quite so much. But remember, like us, they get hungry. Their gastric juices will start to alter a little bit when they know there's a meal coming, so on and so forth. Horses that have to be stable 24/7, really, I think in this day and age, I think everybody has accepted that they must have hay ad lib.
Yep.
There's very few people now that I think try to run their horse on 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day and expect them to not have food.
Yeah.
In Europe, they've all stabled horses with hay ad lib, but in Australia it was not common practice. So, but I think now with the knowledge of gut ulcers and stress, we know that they should have something in front of them all the time.
Yeah.
So that's
that's sort of bringing us on to the feeding now anyway. Yeah. So we'll. Yeah. Yes, it does. Yeah.
So when we were sort of little children and a part of the pony club system in England, I think we all got sort of thumped over the head with a feed bucket, and we all had to learn the 9 rules of feeding. And again, it's an oldie but a goodie,
mm-hmm.
and it pretty much covers all the variables that if you stick within these 9 rules of feeding, you pretty much are, set for life. You're unlikely to make any mistakes with feeding. And so whilst I won't sort of relate to them, say them now, it's quite easy just to Google them.
I was going to say sometimes you get 8 rules of feeding or 10 or 12 or 15 rules of feeding, but generally the rules of feeding are there, aren't they?
It's pretty much the same, yeah. That's right. And, I like to use the KISS method, keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
It was very interesting. One of our horses was a part of a clinical study for a new supplement that's coming out soon with one of the major supplement companies. And they were saying that since we've moved a little bit more towards processed foods for horses, the same as humans,
yep.
We prefer stuff that's ready-made.
Yes.
There's been a dramatic increase in the ulcers.
Really, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? So we sort of know more about ulcers and we can give our horses ad lib hay, but we're still on the other end doing things that are increasing the likelihood of ulcers.
Yes. So if you can start with grass,
mm-hmm.
then you build in. Then you go into hay, and then more hay, and then you start to add some oats. And then if that's not enough. So it's all about, one of the rules of feeding is feeding according to the work done. And if your horse is lightening off more than you want him to with the amount of work you're giving him, then you've obviously got to bring in more concentrated ways of feeding him. So the rule of thumb is you start with more grass, then you add hay and the oats, and then you can bring in your steamroll barley, sugar beet, corn, legumes, browns, etc. I like to sort of tell my students, you should be able to recognise everything in that bucket.
Yep. That's right. Yeah. So it becomes more about the mixed feeds or the pre-mixed feeds rather than, and you either buy your feed all separate, mix it yourself, get a pre-mixed feed, but watch the processed feeds.
Yeah. And make sure you, like with, there's a difference between pre-mixed and processed.
Yes.
Processed means they've been cooked and then they've been probably crumbled or made into like a really fine powder. Then they're bound together and squished through a pelletizer or something like that. So that's very much a processed feed. Pre-mixed feed is just that the manufacturers have gathered all the ingredients and put them through a mixer, like a big concrete mixer really is what they look like.
Yep.
And then they pre-mix and they put it in a bag and everything's already in the bag. The only trouble with that is they do tend to smother it in molasses.
Yep.
So make sure you use a really good brand, a reputable brand, so that there's nothing naughty in there that you don't want.
Yes.
Yeah, but pre-mixed are okay. Processed foods, I keep those for emergencies when, I've got something else, I have to use this.
Yep. All right then. You've got some other things to say about feeding, or we go on to number 7, which is fitness?
The thing about it is keeping it simple is priority.
Yep.
And the rules of feeding. And if you do those 9-10 rules of feeding, then that will answer all the questions about feeding.
The other thing I was going to say, Amanda, just for a bit more in-depth information about feeding, we have had a couple of nutritionalists on Horse Chats, and those interviews are available. So just go to Horse Chats and maybe do a search for nutrition or nutritionalist, and you'll find those. They can talk a bit more about horse feeding, or just, search for feeding. There's a couple of different ways you can search there to find those interviews from the nutritionalists that can give you a bit more in-depth information about feed. Yep.
That's right. Because a lot of people are a little bit, they might have an extra fat horse, but they want it to have certain nutrition, but they don't want it getting any fatter. And then you've got someone who's got a thin horse, so on and so forth. So they're your go-to experts for that sort of help. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so number 7 is fitness.
Fitness, yes. Now, don't we always feel better when we're fit?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So if we know we feel better, then there's very much a good chance that the horse is going to feel so much better. We personally have a lot more ability to problem solve, and we bounce back from physical stress better. And horses, I think, are no different to us. So we have to make sure that we're giving them the right, because you could almost call it cross-training fitness program.
Okay.
Just like us. Nothing worse than doing the same drill every day. Now, there's 2 things. A, it's boring. B, you're always tiring the same muscles. And whilst, say you've got a dressage horse, I believe that dressage horses should jump. And I even have a dressage horse at the moment that's the biggest wuss. And, it's taken us some effort to get him to stop knocking everything down. But he has now eventually started to learn to jump a little bit. And this back muscles, it mentally gives him something more stimulating to do. It develops his back and thrusting muscles better than the dressage. And it's using a whole different set of muscles. So he's getting a holistic fitness.
I like the way you talked about the mental stimulation there, so it's not just about the fitness, it's the mental fitness.
Yeah. I mean, where we live, it was fairly rural. It's now developing quite dramatically, and it's getting a little bit busier, but we still make a point of the horses do poles or small jumps. We're not show jumping anymore, but they still do poles and small jumps, and they get hacked out in the forest. Those, with their flat work, the little bit of jumping, low-level jumping, and the hacking, that seems to keep them pretty bright and chirpy, and they get to see lots of interesting things when they're hacking. We've got lots of, kangaroos and people who ride motorbikes and, boats in the river. So there's lots of things for them to see and experience, and they this just keeps them fresh and, mentally alert. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your fitness is to always balance work time with relaxation time.
Yes.
Just like us.
Yes, for sure. For sure. All right. Now, number 8 is holistic health. What have you got to say about the holistic health of the horse, and how can that make him happier?
Well, I think we've got so many experts, these days to call upon. We've got, really good farriers. We've got people who specialise in teeth. I have vets. The vets now specialise in certain parts. We have a vet here that specialises in leg injuries and a vet that specialises in breeding. So there's all, we've all got very specialised. And we have to remember that when we look after the horse, just like we look after ourselves, nothing works in isolation.
Yep.
And we have to look at everything holistically. So if there's a problem with the horse's feet, the chances are we're going to affect the way he uses his muscles, the way he uses his skeleton, the way he uses his energy.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any pain involved in any of those things, we're then also going to bring in mental health as well. So under holistic health, I like to think of care of the feet. We'll start at the bottom and work our way. The care of the feet, there's nothing worse for a horse to have feet that are hindering his path or causing him pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's external health, which is gut ulcers. It's huge in this country. It's absolutely huge. And just assume your horse has got them. They may or may not be active, but they're probably there. So always keep a mind for that. Then we've got parasites, of course, and care of the teeth and care of the respiratory system.
Okay. Sort of takes us back to the comfort too, doesn't it? You're talking about the equipment and, everything else, but the holistic health, it's still part of the horse's comfort.
Absolutely.
It's probably a very important part, which is why it needs to be a separate one, but very important.
And I know of people who are extremely good at looking after the horses holistic, like they're very good at looking after the health. They're absolutely obsessed with looking after the health of the horse, but they then have lost the balance of the fitness.
Yes.
Then they lose balances of, they're very good at training from the saddle. This is very much a European way thing, is that they're very good at training from the saddle. The discipline and the training is, amazing. And then the horse basically walk over everybody on the ground.
Yeah.
So it's every part of the puzzle in place. And with the health care of your horse, it's the same. So care of the feet, internal health, then external health, skin and eyes, because they will tell us a lot about what's going on inside, but not everything.
Okay, yes.
And mental health, which gets back to go back to 1, 2 and 3.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the mental health of the horse is being well catered for as well.
Yeah. So, Amanda, just bringing us up to number 9 here, you've got set smart goals. Just tell us a bit about how that can affect the horse's happiness.
So we've spoken a little bit before about how horses really don't operate in the past much, and they don't operate in the future very much. They live in the now.
Yep.
And so they really set goals, and they don't plot and plan like we like.
Yes, it makes a good story though, doesn't it? My horse was plotting against me. That's why I fell off today. He plotted against me about this last week. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So horses live in the now, and goal setting is not really on their agenda. However, we humans do seem to operate better when we set clear and realistic goals. The horses are usually quite happy just to come along the journey. It's okay.
Yep.
I'll come along and play. Sounds like a bit of fun. So as long as we keep it fun, they'll keep engaging with us. But remember, they are our goals, and they're not the horses. He's just obligingly coming along for the ride. Mm-hmm. So don't say you're doing it for your horse. And when the other thing is, when it comes up often when you ask people, why are you selling this horse? Oh, well, I don't want to go to the Olympics. Well, hey, neither does your horse. But if that's he'll probably come along there with you.
Don't
is a superstar or not. If you like it, if you like riding that horse and you want it, you keep it and you have the fun with him. So when I say SMART goals, I'm using the acronym SMART, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely.
Yes.
And there is, did you say you've done a chat with Tanya?
Yes, I have, Tanya Mitten. That'll be on horsechats.com/Tanya Mitten.
Right, so I'm sure she would have spoken about setting SMART goals too.
Yes.
And maybe Kerry Mack, she's another one who talks very well about it, so I won't.
I think we've had Kerry as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're experts in the field, and it's brilliant what they have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
So when you make your horse-related goals SMART, you have to do this without an attachment to the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm relating this just a little bit to how we make our goals around horses. So if you make the statement, I will be happy when my horse can do X, that has a strong attachment to the outcome of the goal. You're saying that your happiness relies on the horse providing you with something.
Yes.
Now, happiness is an emotional state of mind that we can choose in any moment of time. We don't have to get permission from our horse or from anybody else that, you can be happy when I do this and you can be happy when I do that. You really don't have to rely on anybody else, and certainly not your horse, to provide you with happiness. However, the statement, I will be ready to compete at Y level when my horse can do X, that is the beginning of a SMART goal.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think setting SMART goals is almost a chat in itself. We could go into it and drill down quite a lot more with the goals. Yeah. Let's digest that a bit, and we might get to come back and talk about that a bit more. And if we can move on to number 10, which you've got as practice mindful horsemanship. And I think about that, and I think about those 3 words is a good way to go into any sort of communication with your horse. Yeah, so if you can talk about that, that'd be good.
So I'm in a very lucky situation that I work full-time with horses, and I don't often have time restraints on, especially if I'm handling a new horse. To me, I don't put a time restraint on. I deliberately set the process to start when I know that if I want to spend limitless time with this horse, I don't have to rush off and do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, my husband, he goes to work at 7:30 every morning.
Yep.
And he works before he goes to work. And he has to work horses by the clock. And it's the reason being that he works them first, he gets up at 5 in the morning and works them then, is because he knows by the end of the day, if he tries to ride, he's got so much going on in his head from his work that he brings that to the ride. And then he's not full to the ride. And I can remember somebody saying to me, you know what, people are always complaining that their horse doesn't concentrate. You know what? Who's the person that's not concentrating here? I think it's usually us. We've got a million things whizzing through our mind, and it's really hard to switch off and be totally present and in the now with the horse, because that's where the horse operates.
Yep.
It's easy. So a good definition of mindfulness is an ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we are doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed to what's going on around us. And that's what I mean by mindfulness.
Yeah.
How do we achieve that? So, a few little tips. Create a physical and mental routine or barrier that separates our worldly problems from our horse time. Work on keeping the day's events, all the woes, all the gossip, all the complaints out of your me and my horse time. Okay? All the baggage should be put where it belongs, in the past. So whenever I'm teaching, I get people come in And they arrive and they're, it's taking all this happened, and then the cat kittens and all. And I say, did you not see the bucket at the front gate? And they said, what bucket? And I said, the bucket at the front gate with the sign over it says, put all my baggage in here. So as you drive my front gate, you dump everything that's happened before you got there into that bucket, and then this time is all for them.
That's a good sign, Amanda. It's a really good sign. Yep. Okay. And sorry, keep going. I had to have a bit of a laugh about that. Yeah.
My way of doing that separation is when I get up in the morning, I write my to-do list early in the morning. Then I'm not having to try and carry it in my head because I just can't do that. I write down my to-do list, which I then tick off as I achieve each thing. And if I don't achieve it, it gets circled and it gets put on the next day's to-do list. Then by the time I've put my boots on, what is written on the list is out of my mind, and I'm free to be present with my horses. Mm-hmm. And I know that if I don't do it this way, I can often go out there and I'll just be, my mind's somewhere else. I'm not thinking. Something will happen. That's when injuries happen. That's when you miss things like, the horse has got a little bit of a swelling on his leg. You miss these little things when you're not present.
Yep.
So that's my little routine.
Yep.
One of the things that happens to me often is that I completely lose track of time. So if I do have an important appointment, then I make sure my horse goal that day is appropriate for the time constraints. And that's along sort of, when I said about the groundwork.
Yes, I was just going to say that might be a time where you do groundwork rather than the riding, sort of taking you right back to number one. Yeah.
Because, one, I don't have to get changed to do it. Two, I have to go out and change his rugs anyway. I might as well go out and do some groundwork while his rug change is happening, do a little bit of groundwork in the paddock, or just perhaps bring him out into the gravel driveway and do a little bit of groundwork. And that's, I can make that groundwork last for 5 minutes and have a good result, or 5 minutes and have a good result.
Yep.
So it can be micromanaged, I guess.
Yes.
And it's really easy. And then I feel like I've achieved what I wanted to achieve, and the horse goes back into the paddock happy.
Yep.
And I'm aware that I lose track of time, so I have to have these things in place.
It's very easy to do when you're out with your horse, isn't it? Lose track of time. I do it all the time. Yep.
Part of the meditative process of being with horses, I find being with my horses, it's quite meditative. I'm sure if they put something in my head or whatever, they could test that your stress levels lower, your heart rate lowers, you're at peace, so on and so forth. It's athletic, so you're using your breathing, you're using your muscles, but you're not stressing. And this is why we like being with our horses, really.
Yes, and why they use so much in therapy as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So horses live in the present, the now. And if we really want to be in tune with our horses, then that's where we need to join them.
Yep. All right, Amanda, why don't we just go through just to sum up and just go over those 10 tips for the happier horse? How about I'll say every second one? So the first one would be training on the ground. So you talked a little bit about that, training on the ground. I think the big thing was that sometimes you can achieve 10 minutes on the ground rather than 30 minutes under saddle. Your results can be better from that short little bit of time.
Yeah, don't ever underestimate the power of training on the ground.
Yep.
Just came over to Australia. I was working in Barrel, and I had gone up to the shop to pick up the mail, and as you do in these rural towns, and there was a couple of old guys there and a couple of old stockies, and they started chatting, and I said, look, I better go. I'll just have enough time to work my horse on the lunge, and then I can be, do something else. And they said, are you too scared to get on it?
Yep.
I sort of looked at them thinking, thank yours, and the general opinion was that you had to lunge your horse to exhaust it so it was safe to get on it.
Yes.
Whereas I do it off the training on the end of a rope. So I was a bit dumbfounded, but now, but fortunately we've moved on from those days.
Yes.
So yes, training on the ground, really,
Okay. The next one then, training under saddle, the things that we're looking for a happy horse.
Yeah. So it's about just filling yourself up with as much learning and, go and rub our shoulders with those who you admire, use great mentors. I can remember having the good fortune to spend a day with Rainer Klimke and a group of other ladies. And the poor guy, he couldn't move left or right. I was right there, hanging on his elbows. Everything he said.
Yep.
But he was terribly... And he answered all my silly questions, and then the questions got better towards the end of the day as they improved. So just go out there and, go up and ask questions.
Yes. The next one was comfort. And you did talk about equipment, bits. You talked about personal equipment, paddocks and floats, just to keep the horse comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Safe and comfortable. And, they love it. They love their comfort. Okay, you've got to think of horse comfort. Remember, horses like to be cooler than we do.
Yep. I
think that 8 degrees was the ideal temperature for most horses. So for us, we'd be shivering. But, they tend to over-rug a little bit in this country. So just, make sure you're aware of what is comfortable, really, the rugging area for horses. But, especially, the way you use your body on the horse.
Yep.
Always looking at what's going to work, what's going to make this really more comfortable for my horse. Yeah, great.
The next one was companionship, and you talked about housing, travelling horses, and also the stallions and being under stress from lack of companionship.
Yeah, I think that they are herd animals. That's the way it is. We have to make that work for us. Yeah.
Okay.
We've got to work for both.
Yep. And the next one was about routines and how horses love routines.
They do, yeah. And we really work better in a routine ourselves. And, if you have to, write it down and make sure that if you have other people coming in, that they follow pretty much the same routine that you do, and that'll keep the status quo nicely for you.
Yeah. All right. The next one you talked about was feeding and following the rules of feeding.
Yeah. It's horses obviously think a lot about feeding. They eat all day and all night. They have rests, obviously, but not for very long. So it's, the little and often and all those wonderful rules of feeding that you can go online for and follow up with specialists and nutritionists to help you when you run into problems.
Yep. All right. Then number 7 was fitness, but you talked about fitness and also about the mental stimulation of just for varying your work.
Well, I think nowadays most people are familiar with the terms the work-life balance and for the horses because, in the wild, a horse will, eat and rest for many hours and he only will run if he's under threat. And then it's very fast and it's only for a few minutes at the most. Whereas when we're training horses, we're usually working them a lot longer than that. And we've got to remember to give them mental breaks when we ride them. Bill Roycroft used to say to me, give him time to think. So that was always a good one. Just loosen off the rein, give him time to think. He'll probably come back with the answer you're looking for. Give him time to think. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, then the holistic health was number 8.
Yeah, remember to take even though you've got access to lots of specialists for all different bits and parts of your horse, you are the carer of the whole horse. You have to take everything into consideration. For instance, I had a horse present with quarter cracks in his feet, and I started thinking, every one of those cracks is in an identical place on every hoof.
And
I asked, what's the problem? He said, it's just dry. The feet are dry. And I'm thinking, but they wouldn't crack like that if they were just dry. And actually had quite a serious back issue that was fortunately was addressed with a change of his training program, and then the cracking healed up.
That's interesting. Yep. All right, the next one, the last one then was the SMART goals.
Yeah, remember then they're your goals, not your horses. And
did I say the last one? I should have said the 9th one. Number 9 is SMART goals. Yeah.
Yes, SMART goals. They're your goals. And we do tend to need them. Humans work better when we've got some goal setting going on. Horses have no idea what goal setting is, but they'll come along with us on our journey if we keep them happy.
Yep.
That's there.
Yep. All right, now the last one is practicing mindful horsemanship.
Yeah, that's right. Now, we all put a lot of time and effort and money into caring for our horses.
Yep.
When you're with them, be with them. Because that's how you get out of them. Yeah. Best out of you, best out. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Amanda, thank you so much for your time today. All of your tips, were just so in-depth. It wasn't just, these are the 10 points and that's it. But you've just gone in, you've given us lots of scenarios, lots of tips, lots of your expertise has come out. So thank you very much for your time today, Amanda, and hopefully we'll talk to you again sometime soon.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much, Glenys.
Okay, thank you. Now, for those people who'd like to be in touch with Amanda, Amanda, do you want to just say your contact details again? We'll put them on the bottom of your page, and they'll also be on horsechats.com/Amanda Hocking, which is Amanda's previous interview, and the link will be through this interview will be on horsechats.com/Amanda Hocking too.
So my contact details are, you can get in contact me through email, Janda, JAANDA11 @bigpond.com, or you can contact me through the Equestrian Australia coaches page in Shepparton, Amanda Hocking, Level 2 coach in Shepparton.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.